Hey, what's up, guys? This is Taya Valkyrie, La Huera Loca, 1/3 of the Death Dolls, and your Impact Wrestling World Tag Team Champion. And this is Counted Out with Mike and Tyler.
Well, we are live, pals. Welcome to the Bill After Sealed of Approved, Counted Out with Mike and Tyler. While I am Mike, we have a very special guest playing the role of Tyler today. We are abandoning the list. We are abandoning our regular format to give this man and his storied career the attention he deserves. You can catch him in action on May 12th in the first round of the 30th Best of the Super Juniors tournament as he takes on Titan. Please welcome the youngest man to ever compete in a New Japan ring, Mr. TJ Perkins. TJ, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you, and let's start right away. Let's start right there with what I just said about the Super Juniors. You have a lot of history in New Japan. How does it feel to be part of the 30th tournament?
It's awesome. This is always the this company is the first big team I ever played for. I started with them. God, what was it? 21 years ago. Back in 2002, and they kind of plucked me right out of high school. I'd only been a professional wrestler for, I don't know, 3-4 years at the time, and it was always the company I wanted to be with. And the Super J Cup was very much sort of a launching point for my interests. I was a big WWF kid growing up, obviously, like I think most people from that generation, or even now, but at the time it just felt like an unattainable sort of goal because we didn't really have the internet like we do now and stuff. So
that's it, yeah.
So I was very much roped into the WCW cruiserweights, and I knew that most of them had sort of come through New Japan, and so it became my goal. And so, to be part of the 30th, and then obviously the big anniversary was recently too, just of the company, just this past year. So to kind of be back for these big milestone numbers was pretty great.
Now, this isn't your first time in the Super Juniors. How do you prepare for something so grueling? And I mean both physically and mentally. There must be a lot of pressure going to something so prestigious as an event like this.
Well, now it's sort of there's a different element to it because I'm a more experienced performer. So
right.
I've always been the young guy in the room. So I started this way back when I was 13. So for so long, I was the young guy in the room, even if I had a lot of experience. After a short amount of time, I became one of the most experienced guys in the room, but just I was the youngest voice. So not a lot was expected of me. So
right.
There was probably a sweet spot where I was had this like veteran level of experience, but I wasn't expected. So I could do whatever I wanted, and I didn't feel like there was anything on me. But now, I'm expected to sort of be a leader in the locker room, a leader on the tour, a leader in the bus, and I guess now I sort of know what the Undertaker felt like for so many years, where they're like, you're kind of a guy that we got to look at for certain things, and now that's a whole new level of things added to me on top of being, a performer, because I'm not exactly like of advanced age or anything yet. So
well, that's what I was just thinking. That you're already saying, and I get the comparison to the Undertaker. You're not even 40 years old though.
Yeah,
like that's ridiculous.
And I want to make it clear, like I don't fancy myself like the Undertaker in any way, but I guess
I know
just
what you're saying,
the loose example of being sort of one of the top checkpoints in a locker room is new to me. And that usually happens when a guy is sort of past a certain point with their career, but like I'm still where I'm at. So being sort of like in prime years, it can be a lot, I guess. But it's good. The hard thing I think now is that, like, I just got off of a tour that was every single day. I don't think we had a day off the whole tour, except for the second to last day. We had one day off before the final show, and that's sort of rare. Every now and then you'll get a few days sprinkled in every now and then, a few off days. But this last tour I was on was really tough. I came home for just a few days, had a couple shows in LA, and now I go back, and now it's another almost everyday tour. And they're all singles matches, so it's hard to sort of stack those together. And then I'll be there pretty much all the way up until the G1 starts. So I have even more stuff after the tournament. So it's you got to pace yourself mentally.
Oh, 100%. I get that. Now, through this interview, I'm going to be name dropping a few guys on the scene to get your take. And I just really want to know how you feel about certain people that you may face later on, especially in this tournament. And that's where I'm going to start. I am a very proud Canadian. We're coming out of Toronto, Canada right now with you. And I got to talk about a fellow Canadian who you might face in this tournament. Is Speedball Mike Bailey on your radar? And what's your thoughts on maybe facing him later on in the Super Juniors?
Yeah, I was really happy to see him get announced. He actually told me ahead of time before we crossed paths in a locker room somewhere recently, and he let me know that he was on board on the list, and I was really happy to hear it, because there was a period of time where it felt like the greater wrestling world was sort of robbed of his performances,
Agreed. Yeah.
because of all the intangibles about his travel. So now that he's sort of kind of re-exploding onto the scene, and I had run into him in England, a couple years back, and was just happy to see him. He's a great guy. He's incredibly talented. I'm really excited for people to get to see him. And now that he's like also full-time with Impact, it's great, because people will get introduced to him, and they have an immediate platform to sort of find him if they really dig his stuff, which I'm sure they will. I am looking forward to getting back in the ring with him. He knocked me out the first time we wrestled.
Legit?
Yeah.
Like shoot? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, knocked me out cold. He smoked me with a kick. I didn't see it coming. We got through it. It was in New York, I think, for Evolve, if I remember correctly. He was a lot newer and younger at the time, and it wasn't, not that it matters. It was just not the version of Mike that you're getting now exactly, but it didn't. I mean, he was really good back then, so I guess that might be interpreted kind of wrong. He was incredibly talented then, and now he's just as good. He's incredible. But yeah, fun. It was a funny story. We laugh about that often. That he put me to sleep the first time we were.
That's really funny, and somehow not surprising, because those kicks are vicious, man. I've said that 1,000 times. I've been lucky being Canadian. We've been spoiled, because when he couldn't leave the country, we just got a lot of them. So I got to see him on shows all the time. And the GCW just had their Canadian premiere not long ago, and I was ringside for him versus Masha Slamovich, and just seeing those kicks in person, I feel like might get knocked out. I can't imagine being on the other end of it like you. That's insane to me, man. I'm going to stick talking to Cam. We're going to leave the tournament for a minute. We're going to stick talking about my home country, Canada, because my co-host Tyler, he will murder me if I don't bring this up. He really wants to ask you about the first time he got to see you live. Because this is a very I wasn't there, but this was a very special match that he got to witness. I want to see if you have any memories of it. We're going all the way back to 2007 in Mississauga, Ontario. You were still wrestling
the match you're going to ask about. Yeah,
you were wrestling as Puma, teaming up with Jushin Liger against Ultimo Dragon and a very young Okada. Do you have any memories of this match? Like this is legendary.
Yeah, I do. I remember the match. I remember at the time, as Puma in New Japan, there was a unit called CTU, Control Terrorism Unit, I think was the acronym, I guess, but what was that from? It's I don't think it was a direct reference, but I guess there was also, what was it, on 24, the TV show or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, there was a group, and essentially it was sort of like the gap between Team 2000 and Bullet Club. So for longer time New Japan fans, there was basically an offshoot of the NWO in New Japan, because obviously, NWO was such a big thing in the late 90s and early 2000s and stuff around that era. And Team 2000 was sort of like NWO Japan. And eventually that disbanded, and then later on you had Bullet Club, but between the two there was an all black and gold faction called CTU, and I was in it with Liger and Gato and a lot of other guys, and so that was why Liger and I were a team at that time, because we were part of the same team in Japan. And yeah, Ultimo Dragon is somebody I had known before, and over the years I've worked with him, a couple times. I've been in the ring with him, and he's a big hero of mine. He's
Well,
also
you said you came up with the WCW cruiserweights, right? So,
yeah,
this must be a big deal for you getting in the ring with this guy. Yeah.
No, of course, and Liger as well, especially with Ultimo Dragon, and it's sort of a twofer for him, because he's a big Sayama guy. He was a big original Tiger Mask guy, and so am I. As Tiger Mask was like one of my primary heroes, and then Okada. He wasn't Okada yet, but he was this incredibly talented guy that from day one everybody sort of knew that someday he was going to be this huge superstar. So it was really a cool experience to be scheduled in that match. And this was one of the occasions where I started to, like, I guess what I mentioned before, like a point where I'm super young and I'm in there with two literal living legends, and a lot of responsibility because my experience level is being put on my shoulders to sort of help guide and lead this match. And I remember thinking that was one of the earlier experiences where it's like you're in there with literally the best guys in the world, and they're looking at you like on equal ground. Like, so I remember that maybe more than anything, that it was like, all right, this is sort of what, even though I'm in my early 20s and all that, it's just I had an experience level both in years and miles traveled that I was beginning to be shouldered with that sort of responsibility, and changed my perspective on a lot of stuff and helped me learn, being in there and being expected from guys like that. So but yeah, it was an amazing experience. You don't get to see Liger versus Ultimo Dragon every day.
No.
And let alone on North American soil. So I thought that's pretty cool. It's sort of a historical moment for international wrestling. You never get to see that.
And to me, like, I'm very envious of Tyler. He brags about this, being able to see this match all the time to me, because he knows I wasn't there. So I'm very jealous, because this kind of match, it's so cool, because to say, hey, in 2007, I got to see Liger and Ultimo Dragon. But then, 15 years later, you still get to say, oh shit, that was TJ Perkins and that was Okada. Because you didn't know it then. You didn't know what you were looking at then. You didn't know you're looking at two of the greatest wrestlers that you're going to see later on. That's got to be really cool for you to see how far you and Okada have come kind of in the same span, right?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, and in my case, I mean, more so for Okada. I mean, he became the Rainmaker. He's going to go down as like, I guess you probably at this point already be able to say he's almost like this generation's Inoki. I mean, he's really leading. He's the face of Japanese wrestling. So I mean, it's incredible how far he's come.
100%. And but don't sell yourself short, man. Don't be too humble, because we've done a lot of interviews this year. We've interviewed a lot of really cool people, man. And I had a fanboy, man. I marked out when I got the email back from you saying that, hey, man, let's do this, because this is like, don't sell yourself short at all, because you are, without a doubt in my mind, one of the greatest wrestlers of the last 20 years, because, everybody thinks, and we're going to get to this in a little bit, if you're not in WWE, a lot of people just don't know who you are. People know who you
Yeah.
are, man. You don't have to be in WWE for people to know who you are, which is I think a big step. And I'm not just talking about that mask behind you at Suicide. They know you for a lot more than just that. Speaking of your work, let's go back to Japan for a minute. Let's start at the beginning. Like I said, you have a lot of history there. I mentioned in the intro that you were the youngest man ever to wrestle in NJPW. You were what, like 17 the first time you got in?
There's actually been a handful, not a lot, but a handful of guys that have been a little younger. I think let's see, Funaki was maybe 15 when he debuted. He was like kind of like a shoot box type wrestler. Nakajima, who actually I was going to mention earlier, is a good comparison for like people that don't know what to expect from Mike Bailey. Nakajima is like a slightly less athletic Mike Bailey, another like MMA background wrestler, and he came in and did his first match in New Japan maybe around 17, something like that, 16, 17. I started in the dojo when I was 17.
Okay.
They started me in the LA version. I guess legally they couldn't import me over. But yeah, as soon as I turned 18, I graduated over the summer and I was already in the dojo. And then my birthday is September. So as soon as I turned 18, they processed a visa and a tour contract for me and sent me to the dojo. And I debuted shortly after my 18th birthday. So it is likely, I think, an age record for Gaijin that probably won't be broken because they really squeezed me in very quickly after my 18th birthday. So you'd have to beat me by like 7 days basically in order to do it. And then a few months later, I was in the Tokyo Dome, I think, because October was my first tour. We actually had a Tokyo Dome 3 shows into my tour. I just didn't perform on it. I was a second for the other guys, for American Dragon and Rocky and the older guys from LA Dojo that weren't Young Lions. And then in May we had another one. At that time we had 3 Tokyo Domes a year. Now it's just January, but it used to be January, May, and October. So May, a few months later, I was 18 and I had my first match at the Tokyo Dome. So the youngest Gaijin in New Japan and youngest Gaijin for the Tokyo Dome might be really, really long-term goal records that may not be broken.
I would assume as much. That's crazy to me because I know what I was doing at the age of 17. I'm not mature enough to go out to Japan and be doing this stuff. Like you,
I mean,
I
hope somebody comes along and breaks it. I thought maybe, like Nick Wayne could do it. He might have been a guest that they invited for Super Juniors and or something like that. But eventually there'll got more guys like that come along, I'm sure. And I hope to see somebody be able to do that sort of thing as well, because it was an incredible experience for me.
I'm sure. Speaking of incredible experiences, let's jump over to a very different company than New Japan for a minute. For our listeners who don't pay attention to New Japan and may not be invested in the Super Juniors, I'm sure they were invested in a very different tournament you were part of. Let's talk about the Cruiserweight Classic for a minute. When did you hear of the idea you were getting involved in this tournament, and what was your first thoughts?
Let's see. They were putting it together a few months prior to it, and I had gotten a call from William Regal. I'd known him a little while, just through WWE scouting and just coming in for dark matches and different things over the years. And he had reached out to me to ask about my interests, and he also reached out to ask if I could help him, find guys that maybe they overlooked or that they hadn't known about yet. They really wanted to get, the best international guys they could find, that were available, of course. And so it was odd. I was almost like in an administrative sort of helper sort of position at first. But I was happy to do it. I was interested in doing it. I had no aspirations of WWE at the time. I had sort of let that goal go. I had already been in a WWE ring for different things, dark matches and TV matches and tryouts and things. And that was enough for me. I didn't, being there, seeing the system, and I had been in the developmental before back in 2000, 2001, around then, UPW, which was the developmental in LA before OVW. And John Cena, I was in John Cena's class when he was being trained, and Victoria as well. Miz came through later on, I think. So, I had sort of had my fill of that experience. I didn't think I had any interest in WWE, but I had the foresight to know that this tournament would be a big thing. It's rare. They don't, at that time, they were still very much in the tail end of the, 6'2", 250, like, sort of bias that they had. And very anti-wrestler bias. And so it was a big deal that they were going to do this, because at the time, other than a couple guys in NXT, like Seth Rollins and Steen and Generico and Finn Balor, like, they really didn't have a lot of wrestlers that were representing wrestling in the company. So I just thought, okay, this is, at the worst, this can go down as the modern day Super J Cup. It'll be this fresh cruiserweight, junior heavyweight thing that may only happen once, and so far it has. It'd be cool if they did it again, but and at best, who knows? It could usher in an entire generation that changes their way of thinking, which that ended up being what it was. After that, you saw them.
Definitely.
They were like, wow, these guys are great. The people love it. They built a whole show around it, and then they revamped, almost revamped NXT. They kind of did revamp NXT for it, and the roster call-ups. They started prioritizing guys. They went out and got Austin Aries, they got Roderick Strong, they got Adam Cole, they got Kyle O'Reilly, they got all these guys who are just the best wrestlers in the world, and they just shut down that bias. Pete Dunne, all these UK guys, like they shut down their bias and said, you know what, let's go in this direction for a while. And to this day, I think a lot of people consider that like 2016 to 2019 era to be like one of the best, if not the favorite of their time as fans, because it was WWE stopped looking like WWE for a little bit and started becoming this whole new idealistic version of what WWE could be.
I couldn't agree with you more. Was it always the plan for you to go over in that tournament? How did you find out you were winning, and what was your what did you take away from that?
Well, I never asked those sort of things. I don't really care about that. Especially when I got to that age. When I was younger, I didn't care anyway. But as I got older, my goal has always been to be a good quarterback and a good point guard. Like I want the guy I'm opposite of the ring with to go. I want him to wake up tomorrow thinking that was the best match I ever had, and this is the best guy I've ever worked with, and I'm better for it. I want them to then go on to have better matches, because of that, and for the office to wake up the next day and say, this story is now better and in a better position for this guy because of that. Like, I want to see that progress in the office and for the guy I worked with. And if I happen to have a good match, great for me, good, fine, but my goal has always been to be that, because that's always been what I've been good at. I have, oddly enough, not oddly, but I guess sort of ironically, like, I just have never been good at being my own star. I've always been great at helping other guys get the best version of themselves. So, I never asked those questions personally, but I did know as early as, I think, round 2, I think. I found it odd, the experience, because I sort of came in with a very rebellious sort of attitude. Not negative, but like you go to a place like WWE, as young performers do, and it's like, jump how high, that sort of thing. And I had always done that when I was younger, and you eat crap for it, and they don't reward that. And it's not a knock on their system. That's just how they are, I guess. It's not a good or bad thing. It's just what it is. But they don't reward proactivity in the way that they sort of encourage it, which is odd. It's a disconnect, but that's just not how it is. And then you come to find there it's very much squeaky wheels get the oil, that sort of thing. And I hate being like that sort of way, but I just sort of came in the door. Like if there was a dress code, I didn't follow it. I wore what I wanted. If there was if there was a time, I was consistently a little bit late, that sort of thing. And usually those are like, zero strike offenses, like in that place. And I found it odd that they didn't care that I didn't follow the dress code. If I was late, they would, for like a meeting or orientation or something, they would bring me into a back room and kind of be like, all right, don't worry about that, we'll catch you up on everything, and here's just what we need you to do for today. And I was like, you guys are being so nice to me. This is odd. This is very backwards from previous experiences, so in retrospect, and this is sort of like Monday morning quarterbacking, but I probably, if I was smarter, I could have guessed they're treating me special for a reason. But I didn't think about that at the time. But there were clues, even though I didn't ask what I was doing. I just was going to one and done, and I was going to go to Lucha Underground. I didn't really care to be there, to be honest. Yeah. And then after each match, with Mac and then with Gargano, it's like the entirety of the who's who of the office infrastructure was there waiting for me behind the curtain. Sean and Hunter and Regal, Terry Taylor, Norman Smiley, all the guys that are really important to that system were waiting for me and like, is everything okay? Do you need anything? And super complimentary. There was literally no criticism whatsoever. And I know I'm good at this, but I don't think I'm that good. Like, you can tell me something, but like they were so almost coddling me. And I remember thinking, this is not normal. And, I guess it's, again, in retrospect, perhaps if I really stopped and looked around at the time, it's like, maybe I'm an investment for them. But yeah, then at a certain point I was asked who a preferable opponent in the finals would be. And then that was after round 2. And I knew then that, okay, that they want me to do this. Yeah. And it was just weird to me because everybody had not yet negotiated, with the company. So it was like, maybe one more round, they all sat us down, everybody from Ibushi to Saber to all the way down the line. We all sat together in one big room, all together. And they had 4 different like kind of areas set up, Terry Taylor and Hunter and Regal and Matt Bloom were all at different sections, Canyon Seaman. And they would call us up one by one to these 4 sections and privately offer us what they wanted. And I remember very vividly sitting there with Saber. Zach is an old friend of mine. Right. And he was like, I really want to get started with New Japan soon. I'm going to ask them for a year to if I could come back in a year and talk about this again. Obviously, he never looked back. And I told Zach this kind of the same. I said, Lucha Underground is going to make me an offer, and I really want to do that project. It's very unique. Still is unique to me. I love that show. It's a shame it's not still going. And I said, I'm not gonna accept the offer, and I didn't at first. So right. It was weird to me that they were so invested in me, even with all these major players still on the table, and without a commitment from me. Like, I wasn't a sure thing. When I won the tournament, I wasn't under contract. Right. They didn't send me a contract until Clash of the Champions. I was already on the main roster. Yeah. So it was an odd experience, but there were clues the whole time. I just I've never really been interested in that sort of thing.
Switching companies once again, you had what we called on this show possibly the best match of the year in 2001 against our fellow Canadian Josh Alexander in an amazing Iron Man match on Impact. How hard is it working with a guy like that, knowing you're making magic, but in front of an empty arena?
It's tough. And I guess depending on your upbringing in the business, it's tough. It's that kind of depends on how tough it is. For a lot of guys, to be honest, I feel like the pandemic era for any of these shows, like, I don't think it was as hard as a lot of people might think it would be for a lot of guys, because a lot of guys in newer generations are not sort of raised to do their stuff in the ring.
Right.
And so they're going out there with preset calls and things that they want to do. And so I feel like it was almost easier to do that. I know a lot of guys have sort of admitted since then that it was a lot easier. It wasn't as much fun because you don't get that energy from the audience, but it was easier to do their work. But for somebody like me that's more old school, it's like I don't go in with that many things preset. I go in almost with a blank slate because I was always taught the opposite. Like,
Right.
So to not have that element was very different for me. So that was a little tough. I've never been an energy guy. Like I don't get nervous, I don't get anxious, and I don't really get adrenaline. So not having an audience didn't play a factor as far as like an energy level, like being able to do any of this. I've always been steady-handed, regardless. So that didn't really bother me at all. The hardest part was that it was formatted for television. That was the hardest part. If there's any performers listening to this, then especially performers that have gone on to like sort of like the highest levels, like you'll know like that it's hard to do to perform for TV. It's like going from high school or college to the NBA, and it's like at that point it's not even about basketball. Like it's about managing like a sports television show almost, because there's so much other layers to the game. And so like, for an Iron Man, if you do 10 minutes in the ring, you might have one commercial break, and you have to factor that into your work. So if you're doing 60 plus minutes, and I think we did, I don't know, I'm going to roughly say 65, might be a couple more, a couple less. Cause I know we went to overtime. So it was a little over an hour. Yeah. So that's 7 commercial breaks that I had to sort of manage while wrestling a very physical guy. I mean, Josh is no joke. I mean, he's the greatest Canadian wrestler I've ever been in the ring with. And obviously there's Canadian legends I just haven't been in the ring with, but I'm confident saying that someday when Josh retires, for people that have been in the ring with him and watched him, he'll go down close to that same level as a performer as far as his capabilities. He's very good, very physical, and you definitely feel it when you're wrestling him. So, which I like, but over the course of an hour, that can be kind of tough.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun because you're in there with a buddy. He's the type of guy that we trust each other to punch each other in the nose, man. I mean, we have that sort of relationship, and that was great. It was just logistically, it was a tough night to be a quarterback for me.
Josh is a good friend of the show. We love Josh here on Counted Out. If I had my way, if I was in Scotty's shoes, I'd have you and Josh at the next Multiverse United show. However, it doesn't look like Josh will be ready by then. So let's play a little armchair booker here. If you could wrestle anybody on that current Impact Wrestler roster at Multiverse as a representative of New Japan, who are you facing?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I would like to bring Akira with me and wrestle the Guns. Akira, the New Japan just recently worked out the paperwork for his US visa. That's why he's never come to North America. And and so I'm looking forward to, especially during G1 season, to try to do more international stuff with him. I not just because the team is really clicking now, but because a lot of people don't know how good he is, and I can't wait for him to be on other platforms and for people to see it. And over the past year, like our run has started to get these internal comparisons to like the Young Bucks and the Machine Guns and these classic teams from the generation prior, and a lot of these teams are still around. So we've been hoping to try to get some of these matchups, and the Guns are definitely on the list. And you know, Sabin and Shelly are two really long-term friend of mine. Like I've known them about 20 years, so would love to do that.
That I really, really hope there's some people from Impact listening to this, because make that happen, man. That is an Impact fan. I'm a massive Impact fan. That is an Impact fan's wet dream right there. That's ridiculous to me. That I could not have expected you to come up with a better match than that. And that wasn't even on my radar. I didn't even think of a tag match. That is ridiculous. While we're talking about your opinion on people, we're going back to a question from my co-host. He begged me to ask you this question. He says that Great O'Khan may have one of the wildest social media accounts in all of wrestling. What is a night on the town like with him, and do you have any stories you can share?
Oh, it's very, it's it's very much what you would expect from his social media accounts. After every single show, we always have a meeting or a dinner to go to. He has so many connections to so many people. You know, it seems like every day we have a new meeting with a collaboration, whether it's Justin Davis, our jewelry partners, or you know, other ones with you know, I went to an exhibit with Reebok, and then you know they worked with us on a few things, and they're still working with us on a few things, and then you know, so many different dinners with people, like different celebrities or just notable people. And so we're always going out, and it's always Great O'Khan's grand plans that lead to it. He's very much, if we were the Four Horsemen, he's basically our Ric Flair. Like he's as real as he seems, but he's great. You know, I mean, he's an amazing guy.
I love that. Before we take it home, first of all, thank you so much for your time today. We want to be respectful. We're going to start wrapping it up, but I have two more questions.
Sure.
We're going to switch promotions one last time. I have a weird question for you, and hopefully it's not a touchy subject, but okay. On this show, it's been talked about with many people. We've had Jimmy Jacobs talk about it. We've had a few other people talk about it on the show with me, because I am a massive fan of Wrestling Society X. Yeah. However, I've read in the past that maybe you weren't. May I ask why that promotion just wasn't a fit for you?
No, I was a big fan of Wrestling Society X. A couple people have asked me that, and I don't know maybe where that came from. Maybe it was a misquote or a misinterpretation. Okay. Like I thought it was great. That's a lot of the reason why I was really adamant about meeting with and going to Lucha Underground.
Was because so similar, and a lot of the same guys.
And a lot of the people that were on the administrative and production end of both projects, they were on both projects, I guess is what I was trying to say. So a lot of those people I knew and have, you know, friendships and business relationships with. So I loved both of them. I just, for whatever reason, Wrestling Society X wasn't a long-term thing for me. I came in for the pilot and like another episode, and maybe I wasn't high on their priority lists, and maybe they weren't high on mine. I want to say maybe because I was preparing to try and go to WWE at the time.
Okay.
Something like that. So it was more of a time division sort of thing. Like I just maybe had other projects that might have been on my horizon, and then likewise for them, they had other guys that they're really trying to hone in on, and I was one of them, just maybe not towards the top of the list. So that's the only reason why that didn't continue. I really loved the project, and I really liked the aesthetic of it. I still do. I wish that somebody would produce another show just like it. But yeah, no, I loved it.
See, kids, never trust the dirt sheets. Oh man, it makes a guy like me look like an idiot in the end. Well, okay, I'm so happy to hear that. I am so happy to hear that because that, like you said, you were probably misquoted or something like that in an article I read. So with those two companies, were you able to form any sort of relationship with Vampiro at all?
Yeah, I had actually known Vampiro before because when I was a young lion in New Japan, my excursion was to Mexico. So I lived in Mexico for a year
Oh,
and
cool.
worked for CMLL when I was 18. So right after that Tokyo Dome that I did when I was 18 in 2003, I spent the rest of the year in Mexico.
Right.
Um, and so I met him there. And I don't think I met him prior because I had also gone over to Tijuana a lot when I was a teenager and worked in Mexico that way. But I think I first met him then in like 2003. So I had known him, and he was actually a big supporter of mine when I came in, for the little bit that I did. Even though I didn't stay, and even though I wasn't their top priority, they had plans for me had we had figured something out because he had alluded to that. He would tell me all the time, "Wait till we see what we have planned for you, or these ideas that we have for you once we get further into to the show." It just never came to pass. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely a character. He's a wild man.
Yeah.
But it's always been in a very entertaining way for me as far as like our real life encounters and stuff. And he's always been such a sweetheart to me. So, but yeah, it was a lot of fun being able to be around him again for that short period.
The two Canadians, I always said I was scared. I want to, but I'm scared to interview. Were Sin Bodhi and Vampiro. We got Sin Bodhi done, and that was just as scary as I thought it was going to be. That man, I love him to death, but God, he's weird. And Vampiro, it was the same thing. We haven't gotten that. We're going to get it done one day, I hope. But it's one of those things where it's like intimidating and scary at the same time. But
Maple Leaf, Marilyn Manson, and Maple Leaf, Rob Zombie.
there you
Basically,
go.
those two guys. Yeah.
That's a great analogy. We always like to finish off our interviews by asking this very simple question. TJ, if you're going to look back from 1998, when you started this whole journey, all the way to 2023, look at your whole career, what's a story or a moment that just makes you sit back and fucking smile?
Oh, one of the best things. I mean, there's been a lot of fun stuff. If I had to narrow it down to a few, there's a few that stand out that were pretty great to me. My first Raw in Staples Center was pretty great. Obviously, being in my hometown, and also there's one night where I closed the show in the Anaheim Pond. 205 would go on after SmackDown, as people knew for a period of time, and I was the last match on 205, so therefore the last match of the night in the building. And I had a buddy of mine that started with me in Southern California. We used to do these dirt shows in the Anaheim marketplace, and we would drive past the pond every night, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, like these first few years I was wrestling. And I would tell him every night, like, someday we're going to make it there. And, my buddy ended up hanging up his boots a few years later after that. But I made it a point to bring him to the pond when I closed the show there. I think it was when I wrestled Pac, one of the times I wrestled Pac on 205. And that was a big deal because it was like, I went to the Iron Man match there with Brett and Sean. And that was like, that was like the arena, like nearest
Wow.
my house. So doing Staples Center and the ponds when I was in WWE was a big deal. The first Tokyo Dome show I did was a big deal. I was just a teenager. And the Super J Cup, when I finally did it in 2019, they did it in America. And the third night was in Los Angeles. And I remember thinking, man, this is great. And Rocky Romero is my oldest friend in wrestling since literally day one. We started at the same place. And I remember, so we were opposite teams for the last night of the J Cup. And I remember thinking, man, we're in LA. I'm with my oldest friend in wrestling. I beat him that night, which was funny. And it's like, wow, this is the whole reason I got into wrestling, is because of this. And we're doing this show in our hometown, and it was great. But probably the single most thing I would look back on with happiness is the CMLL anniversary show we did in 2003. At the end of our time in Mexico, we did the anniversary show. For them, that's like WrestleMania. And Arena Mexico is huge. It's my favorite arena in all of wrestling. It's my favorite culture in all of wrestling is Mexico. And we had been doing all these great matches over the summer. So we had the final match of the series against a team we had been rivals against. Rocky Romero was my teammate. And it was almost like we were like the Hardys Dudleys of CMLL for that year. And being there in that arena and just a teenager and a kid, it was like, man, I could have retired then and been so happy because it was such an amazing app. I'll never be able to replace that. I'll never look at anything as cool as that.
Man, that is such a great story. Thank you so much for that, man. Guys, you have no idea how lucky we are to be talking to this man today. He is like an hour out from jumping on a plane back to Japan, and you can see him in the Super Juniors tournament. Thank you so much for giving us your time today, TJ. This was a great chance to talk to you. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
And on behalf of Mr. TJ Perkins, we have been counted out.